Brian said, "You're lucky we even found a place," while tapping on his phone like he was just checking the weather, not deciding my future. That was the last thing he said before turning back toward the elevator, already scrolling again. He didn't even glance up when I said his name. Rachel gave me this quick side hug. It barely lasted 2 seconds, and then they were gone, just like that, like I'd been dropped off, taken care of, checked off a list. I stood there in the middle of this new room, if you could even call it that. Twin bed, a stiff vinyl chair, walls the color of old cream, like they'd seen too many springs and too few people who stayed long. I kept waiting for something to feel familiar. Even the view outside the window felt borrowed. The whole place smelled like lemon cleaner and those sad carnations from hospital gift shops, too long in the vase. I set my purse down real slow. My hands were still shaking from the drive, or maybe it was something deeper than that. They said it was temporary, just a solution, just until the estate got settled. Estate. That word stung, because my house wasn't just some line in a file. It was where Paul and I raised our kids, grew tomatoes every summer, held Sunday dinners even when we were too tired to cook. And now it's paperwork. Rachel barely said a word in the car. When Brian brought up selling the house, she just stared out the window. I asked if we could talk about it. Nobody said a thing. I sat down on the edge of the bed, not really sure what to do next. The blanket was tucked in way too tight, like everything else here. I reached into my cardigan pocket and felt my house keys, still there. Cold, a little bent. The one with the red dot was still marked for the back door. I held onto them like they still meant something. Dinner came on a tray, some kind of mystery meat, canned peaches, lukewarm coffee. I didn't touch any of it. Later, I found the remote but didn't turn on the TV. Noise wouldn't fix anything. I lay back on the bed, slow and careful, and stared up at the ceiling. Beige. Empty. I counted the corners. 4. Just like a box. Just like a cell. I said it out loud, just to break the silence. He didn't ask. He decided. I don't remember falling asleep, but I do remember the sound that woke me. A drawer sliding open, the soft clink of porcelain. Someone else was in the room now. I turned my head and saw her. Her gray hair was pinned up, and she wore a floral scarf like it meant something to her. She was unpacking her things on the dresser we were apparently sharing. A little plant, a photo frame, and a tin of cinnamon mints. I didn't say much that first morning. Honestly, I didn't have to. My roommate talked enough for the both of us. "Don't let them fold you like a napkin," Catherine said, as she dragged a rolling suitcase across the linoleum. She dropped it with a grunt and pulled out this little potted plant, half wilted but still hanging on, and a framed photo of 3 men in army uniforms. "That's my husband and our boys. 2 made it home," she said. I was still sitting on the edge of my bed, wearing the same cardigan from the day before. The sleeves smelled like lemon balm and starch. I'd started twisting my wedding ring inward on the drive over, like if I didn't see it, maybe none of this was really happening. Catherine flopped onto her side of the room and offered me a cinnamon mint from a crinkled pouch. I just shook my head. "You're not planning on staying, are you?" she asked, like it was no big deal. I blinked. What? This place. People like us, they tuck us in and just hope we don't ask too many questions. She had on socks with blue daisies, and there was an oxygen machine by her nightstand, but her voice cut through the morning like a church bell. I didn't answer, mostly because no one had asked me that before, not even Brian. By the time we got to breakfast, the room was already full of noise. Some folks were talking too loud, others didn't say a word. The second the doors opened, I was hit with the smell of soggy eggs and burnt coffee, styrofoam cups everywhere, trays lined up like puzzle pieces that didn't quite fit.
I walked slow behind Catherine, pretending it was just my knees. They were serving shepherd's pie, Brian's favorite when he was a kid. I used to make it with fresh peas and rosemary. This version looked gray and runny. I stared at it too long. Catherine nudged me and said, "You know what I miss? Not the food. Time. I used to think I had plenty of it, but time's sneaky. It hides in the corners and waits until you're too polite to demand it back." We sat near a window where the sun didn't quite reach. She was quietly peeling the edge of her napkin when I finally said, "I didn't get a choice. My son made it for me." She looked up over her glasses and said, "That's when you start writing your own ending, sweetheart." I didn't answer, not out loud, but something inside me shifted a little, like a knot starting to come undone. That night, after lights out, I dug a pen out of my purse. The only paper I had was a napkin from lunch I hadn't finished. I pressed it against the nightstand and wrote just one line, barely legible. "This is not the end." I folded it twice and tucked it under Catherine's plant, right into the roots. She didn't see me. She was already snoring, soft and steady. But I stayed up, listening to the hum of the hallway lights, the little rattle from the heating vent, and for the first time since I got there, that one line on a napkin, it felt like something that belonged to me. And just like that, I wasn't completely scared of tomorrow anymore. They told me I'd have weekly counseling. Turns out weekly just meant whenever someone happened to remember to knock. After a week, I'd already memorized the carpet patterns in the hallway. Catherine had nicknames for most of the nurses. There was Hairnet Holly, Apology Marlene, Clipboard Carl. She called me Miss Puzzler because I was always thinking, always quiet. Rachel came by once. She brought a frozen pack of blueberry muffins and stayed less than 10 minutes. Her phone buzzed 3 times while she was there. She didn't even sit down. "They've got a schedule for everything, Mom. It's good. Structure helps." She kissed the top of my head before leaving, the way I used to kiss hers before ballet recitals. Late March came with gray skies and rain that blew sideways, the kind that makes you tuck your chin in when you walk. I stood by the hallway window, listening to the drip, drip of a leak in the ceiling. Behind me, 2 staff at the reception desk were whispering. "Title's nearly ready, just need her signature, but Rachel said she'll handle it." I froze. My hands clenched the sides of my cardigan. They didn't say my name, but they said hers. Back in my room, I called Rachel. She didn't pick up at first. When she finally did, I asked her, "What title paperwork are they talking about?" "Oh, it's nothing," she said. "Brian's just taking care of some legal stuff. Don't worry about it." I opened my mouth to say something, but she was already cutting me off. "Love you, Mom." Then she hung up. I didn't even get to ask a second question. Catherine looked up from her crossword. "They move fast when you're quiet," she said. "Fast and sneaky." That night I started writing. Not much, just a few lines in an old spiral notebook I found in the Lost and Found in the rec room. I wrote down dates, names, little things people said when they thought I wasn't listening. I even drew a layout of the nursing home, just to remind myself that I still had a map of something. The next morning, I asked if I could use the computer at the front desk. I wanted to check my bank account. Marlene, Nurse Marlene, at least she called me by my name, walked me over and helped me log in. Invalid password. I tried again. Locked. I stared at the screen until it all blurred. By lunch, Catherine noticed. "You're quieter than usual," she said. "I think they're selling my house," I told her. She blinked once. "Then I guess it's time you get noisy." That night, I stood in the little bathroom, staring at myself in the mirror. The light was harsh, unforgiving, the kind that shows every line, every crease, every regret. I didn't look away. "You're not done," I whispered to the woman looking back at me. "They just think you are." And for the first time since I got there, I actually believed that maybe I wasn't, that maybe I could still be more than whatever they'd already decided I was. My house was on Zillow. listed, staged, sold, and not with my signature. It happened on a rainy morning in early April. I had gone to the common room to check the local weather. Catherine wanted me to see if the Thursday bridge group got canceled again, but instead of storms, I found something else. There it was, my house, that little blue one on Jefferson Street with the porch swing and the lopsided hydrangeas that always bloomed in May. My living room was right there on the screen, bright and familiar. The curtains still hung the way I'd hemmed them with Rachel before her first homecoming. And under the photo, it said, "Charming and well-maintained. Move-in ready. Sold pending escrow." It felt like the chair vanished beneath me. Not literally, but that drop in my chest was real. I just stared at that word, sold, until it didn't even look like a word anymore. Catherine shuffled over and asked, "Something wrong with the weather?" I didn't answer. I just printed the listing. My hands were shaking. At the bottom, in tiny print, was the agent's name. I wrote it down in my notebook, the one I carried everywhere now. Page 3, right beside that first napkin note. Then I texted Brian. "Why is my house sold without my signature?" He replied 5 minutes later. "We thought it was best. Rachel handled it." That was it. No punctuation, no explanation, no apology. Catherine sat next to me and asked, "Now what?" Her voice was soft, not pushy. I didn't answer. Not right away. I kept reading the listing 3 times. Every detail stood out. The throw blanket still folded on the couch, the dent in the floor where my old coffee table used to sit. Nothing had been changed. They didn't even bother to stage it. They just opened the door. I tore the printout in half, but not before writing down the real estate office's number. That evening, I asked Marlene if I could make a personal call. She gave me a look, but didn't say anything, just pointed to the landline at the front desk. When the receptionist picked up, I used a voice I hadn't used in years, lighter, a little brighter. "Hi there," I said. "I'm calling on behalf of my aunt, Eleanor. I think her house on Jefferson just sold." "Oh, yes," the woman said. "We're in escrow, closing in 2 weeks. Lovely buyer, moved up from Oregon." I thanked her and hung up before my hands could betray me. That night, when I got back to the room, Catherine was already in bed. But on my pillow, there was a yellow sticky note, neat handwriting, small, careful scripts. "If you're ready to make a move, I know someone." I held that note like it might disappear if I blinked. And something shifted inside me. It wasn't rage. It wasn't panic either. It was colder than that, older. I wasn't just hurt anymore. I was awake. And I was done waiting for someone to knock. "You signed it away, Mom," Rachel said. "Brian told me you wanted this. I thought I was helping." It was late, well past lights out, when I made the call. Marlene let me use the phone in the nurse's office. She didn't ask questions, just gave me a quiet nod and handed me a mug of hot water. I dropped in the last sachet of Earl Grey I'd hidden in the back of my drawer. I needed something familiar, something to hold on to. Rachel picked up after the 3rd ring. "Mom?" Her voice was cautious, like she already knew this wasn't going to be quick. "I need to ask you something," I said, "and I want a real answer." There was a pause. "Okay." "Why didn't anyone ask me? About the house? About anything?" She let out a long sigh. "Brian handled the paperwork. He said you'd agreed, that you wanted this, to be there." "And you believed him?" "He's the one who spoke to the lawyer," she said, a little too fast. "I just signed the forms he gave me." "But you didn't call. You didn't ask if I was okay with it." There was another pause. This one lasted longer. I let it sit there, let the silence stretch long enough to make her feel it. "Things were moving fast," she finally said, "and honestly, I thought it was what you wanted." "What I wanted?" I said slowly. "Rachel, you haven't asked me what I wanted in months." She bristled. "That's not fair." "No, what's not fair is waking up and finding your name gone from the mailbox, your curtains still hanging in someone else's windows, and no one even asked." She didn't say a word. "I'm still here," I said quietly.
I didn't disappear just because it was easier for you to stop looking." I heard rustling on her end. I pictured her pacing that spotless condo she shares with Mark, walking in circles on those cold tile floors. "I didn't know the house was listed," she finally said. "I swear, I wouldn't have let that happen." I took a sip of tea. It had gone lukewarm. "No," I said, "you didn't know because you didn't bother to check." Another silence. This one was different. Final. "I have to go," Rachel said. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. "Of course." She hung up. I sat there for a while longer, letting the dial tone fade into nothing. The nurse's office smelled like antiseptic and lemon hand cream. I hadn't cried, not yet, but my throat felt like it was stuffed with cotton. When I walked back into the hallway, Catherine was standing outside my door. She had on her pink slippers and that old cardigan that always smelled faintly like menthol. "Well," she said, handing me a folded piece of paper, "you still want to meet my lawyer friend?" I took it without saying a word, but I didn't throw it away. I hadn't seen a lawyer since my husband passed, but that morning I put on some lipstick anyway. Dusty rose, the shade he used to say made me look ready to solve anything. Catherine was already waiting by the front doors at 10 a.m. sharp, holding her purse like it might jump out of her hands. "He's not flashy," she told me, "but he's smart, and he listens." We took a cab downtown. Neither of us said much, just stared out opposite windows like strangers who already knew the same secret. The office was tucked between a dentist's office and an old floral shop with sun-bleached window decals. The receptionist smiled as we walked in, but her eyes lingered just a second too long on the wedding photo album I carried. Inside, Daniel Givens stood to shake my hand. Mid-50s, calm desk, just a legal pad, a blue pen, and the kind of face that looked like it hadn't been surprised in years. "Ms. Campbell," he said once we sat down, "are you here to sue or to win something bigger?" I looked him in the eye and said, "I want to be heard, and I want my name back." He nodded and let me speak. So I did. I told him everything. The forms I never saw, the vague texts from Brian, that hollow conversation with Rachel, the listing with my curtains still hanging like the house was pretending I'd just stepped out for groceries. Catherine didn't say a word, just sat there with her hands folded, watching. I didn't have to look at her. I knew she was steady. When I finally stopped, Daniel leaned forward. "There's a case," he said, "and more importantly, you still have rights. You never signed over your power of attorney. If they're making decisions for you without due process, that's not just wrong, that's actionable." He slid a form across the desk. "This revokes any current POA until we sort things out in court. It'll force a formal review." "And the house?" I asked. He glanced at my album. "We'll start by figuring out who authorized the sale and whether they had any legal right to do so. The rest, we handle as it comes." My hand trembled just a little when I picked up the pen. Not from fear. It felt more like that moment when a drawbridge finally lowers and you realize, yeah, I can cross this. When I signed, he said something that stayed with me. "If they want to erase you," Daniel said, "we'll make sure you show up in bold." It landed right in the middle of my chest. Outside, the sun had warmed up. Catherine adjusted her scarf and flagged down another cab. We didn't say much until we were already halfway back to the facility. Then she reached into her bag and pulled out a small notebook with sunflowers on the cover. "Next step," she said, handing it to me, "your plan." I opened it. Every page was blank. But for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel empty at all. If any of this feels familiar to you, if you've ever felt like your voice was quietly set aside, I'd really love to hear your story. Leave a comment below. I read them. I really do. And if you want to know what happened next, what Catherine and I started planning, stick around. The next part, let's just say, even I didn't see it coming.
Oh, and if you haven't already, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. That way we can keep walking this road together, one quiet step at a time. The cherry tree outside my window had bloomed overnight. Soft pink petals brushed up against the glass, like tiny fingertips tapping to remind me that time was still moving, even here. I sat there watching them flutter, thinking about front doors, not the kind that lock behind you, but the kind that close with a solid, satisfying click, the kind only you have the key to. I didn't want revenge. I wasn't looking to teach anyone a lesson. I just wanted out. I wanted space, room to stretch my back, pour a cup of coffee without someone reminding me it was time for my blood pressure pills. I wanted a front porch and the kind of quiet you choose, not the kind that comes with a plastic tray of bland food and a locked schedule. Daniel called at 10:03 a.m. sharp. Catherine handed me the phone with a wink and stepped out of the room. "Eleanor," he said, "it's official. The POA has been frozen pending court review. They can't sell anything, transfer anything, or touch your funds until further notice." I hadn't even realized I was holding my breath until I let it out in one long, quiet sigh. "Thank you," I said. "There's still work to do," he added, "but now you've got standing. You get to decide what comes next." After I hung up, Catherine walked in like a school teacher checking homework. She had a notepad in one hand and a pen in the other. "All right," she said, "what do we need for an exit?" At first, it felt kind of silly, writing it all down like some teenage runaway, but I followed her lead. A place to stay, some cash, transport, my prescriptions, my photo albums. She tapped the list. "What about clothes?" "I'll take whatever fits in one bag," I said. "The rest never really felt like mine anyway." Catherine gave a small nod. "That's the spirit." That afternoon, I made a call. Linda, someone from my old church group, picked up on the second ring. We hadn't talked in over a year. "Eleanor," she said, like she wasn't sure I was real. "I need a favor," I told her. "Just a place to land. 2 weeks, maybe 3. She paused for a second. Then she said, "The guest room's still yellow. You always liked that color." I almost cried right there in the facility garden, sitting next to a rusting bird bath and a patch of tulips that someone had planted years ago and never tended again. That night, while game shows flickered on hallway TVs that no one really watched, I opened the bottom drawer in my room and pulled out a cloth pouch I'd tucked behind some old crossword books. Inside was my mother's watch, a pair of earrings I never wore, 13 pages of notes, and one small envelope. I turned to Catherine. "What's this?" She smiled. "Open it." Inside was a key. Simple, brass, no label. "Storage unit," she said. "It's been mine for years. It's yours now. There's a suitcase inside, some clothes, nothing fancy, but they'll hold up." I stared at her, stunned. "You're not the only one who needed a restart," she said. "I never used it, but I kept paying for it, just in case." That night, I tucked the key inside my left sneaker, the same pair I wore when Brian and Rachel dropped me off. I pushed the shoe back into the corner of my closet, nice and neat, and whispered to myself, "One more week. Just one more." I left the nursing home without saying goodbye. No tears, no explanations, just a cardigan, a blue tote bag, and a plan. It was the same bag I'd used years ago when Rachel moved into her college dorm. She'd stuffed it with throw pillows and rolled-up posters, and I'd driven home with an empty trunk and a heart that felt just as hollow. This time, I packed that bag for myself. I woke up before sunrise. The birds outside my window were already chattering, like they knew something was about to shift. The hallway lights were still low, the building not fully awake. I got dressed quietly. Soft pants, comfortable shoes, and the cardigan with deep pockets. My bag was hidden under clean towels in the laundry bin Catherine had wheeled into my room the night before. "I'll give you 10 minutes," she whispered. "Then I'll pull the old coffee spill in the hallway trick." I smiled and nodded. At 6:42 a.m., I slipped down the hall while Catherine waved Nurse Marlene toward the break room. I didn't move fast, my knees made sure of that, but I kept going. The back door creaked open. Outside, the morning was soft and gold, the air cool on my cheeks. The Lyft driver was already there, just like I'd scheduled on Catherine's tablet the night before. "You, Eleanor?" he asked, looking a little surprised. Early 30s, warm smile, baseball cap. "I am," I said, settling into the seat next to my bag. He glanced at me in the mirror. "Heading to a family gathering?" I looked out the window. "No, I'm going home." He didn't press, and I was grateful for that. The ride took 25 minutes, long enough to watch the town roll by. We passed the grocery store I used to shop at, the park where Rachel once fed ducks with her hair in pigtails, my old church with the white steeple still standing proud against the sky. Linda's house sat on a quiet street with a wraparound porch and a trellis full of blooming wisteria. When we pulled up, she was already at the door, wearing a yellow cardigan and holding a mug that smelled like cinnamon. "You found it," she said gently. I did. She didn't ask questions, just gave me a hug and took the tote bag from my hands like this was something we did every Friday. Inside, her house looked just the same. Bookshelves, jars of dried herbs, a piano with one missing ivory key. The guest room was small, but the window opened wide and the curtains didn't match. I loved that instantly. Later, we sat on the porch. She poured tea into 2 mismatched cups and slid one across the table. "I don't need to know everything," she said, "but I'm really glad you're here." I didn't say anything right away. I was too busy breathing, really breathing, for the first time in months. The sun kept climbing. A dog barked in the distance. A sprinkler clicked on somewhere down the block. Then Linda looked over and asked, almost in a whisper, "So, what are you going to do with that freedom?" I watched the steam rise from my cup and let her question hang there, because for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel afraid to answer it. My house was gone. My savings were a mess. My children felt like strangers. But I had something they didn't see coming: time and silence. That first night at Linda's, I didn't sleep. Not really. I just lay there under a patchwork quilt, listening to the hall clock ticking and the wind brushing against the side of the house. My body was free, sure, but my mind was still stuck back there on that gray linoleum floor with the smell of overboiled peas. The next morning, I set my tea down on Linda's kitchen table just as the Zoom call connected. Daniel's face popped up on the screen, shirt sleeves rolled, tie a little loose, framed by shelves of legal books and 2 coffee mugs stacked behind him. "Morning, Eleanor," he said, warm but focused. "I've got good news and a to-do list." He explained that Brian had tried to push the house sale through using the old power of attorney, the one that's now frozen. Since it was technically invalid, his team could challenge it. Escrow hadn't closed yet, which meant we still had a window. "Do you have anything?" he asked. "Old insurance documents, receipts, anything that ties you to the house?" I nodded. "There's a storage unit. Catherine set it up. I haven't gone yet." "Go today," he said. "Anything helps. The more paper trail, the better." So Linda and I drove out that afternoon. Her little Honda creaked along the back roads until we got to a row of beige metal doors lined up like teeth. She handed me the key without saying a word. Inside, it was all dust and memory. I found my old KitchenAid mixer wrapped in towels, a tin full of recipe cards, lesson plans from my 3rd grade classroom, a bundle of holiday decorations labeled Easter but tasteful. Toward the back, under a folded quilt, there was a sealed box with Paul's handwriting on the side. It just said, "Paul's watch." I sat down on a milk crate and opened it slowly. The leather strap had aged, but the face still gleamed, just like the day he got it. Next to it was a note, creased and yellowed with time. "Whatever happens, start again. Love, P." It wasn't a grand gesture. It wasn't a life raft. It was something better. It was permission.
That evening, Daniel's paralegal sent over a digital form. We started filing the claim to pause the sale and open a fraud inquiry. I didn't flinch, not anymore. After Linda went to bed, I stepped out onto the back porch and called Catherine. The line clicked twice, then she picked up. "Well," she said, "either you're calling to tell me you made it big, or you need me to smuggle a stapler." I smiled. "Tell the others I'm not disappearing." She paused for a second, then said, "I'll let them know." "And Eleanor?" "Yeah?" "Good for you." I hung up and looked at the sky. It was clear, wide, full of quiet stars. My husband used to say that the hardest part of change is just deciding you're allowed to have it. Turns out he was right. "You didn't just sell a house," I told Brian. "You sold what little respect you had left." He blinked like I'd slapped him, and maybe I had, just not with my hand. The park cafe was nearly empty. There was a chill in the air, like someone had left a window open to November. Dry leaves scraped across the pavement while the servers set down 3 mugs, my chamomile, Brian's untouched espresso, and Rachel's herbal tea she just kept stirring. I'd invited them under the pretense of giving one final update. I figured if they were going to hear the news, they should hear it from me, not a lawyer, not a letter, just me. Brian showed up 15 minutes late, of course, buttoned-up coat, jaw clenched. Rachel came on time, but her eyes told me she hadn't slept in weeks. There was an apology in them somewhere, but it never quite reached her mouth. "I'm not here to argue," I said, wrapping my fingers around the warmth of the mug. "I just want you both to know where things stand." And I laid it out. The sale was on pause. The power of attorney was void. Daniel's firm was reviewing everything and pushing for reversal. I wasn't threatening anyone. I was just stating the facts. Brian leaned back, arms crossed. "You've always had a flair for drama." "No," I said quietly. "You've just never liked it when I spoke directly." He shook his head. "You've made this hard for everyone. Rachel was trying to help." Rachel cut in, soft but steady. "I didn't know it was listed, Brian. She already told me that." His mouth opened, then closed again. "I asked for one thing," I said, looking straight at them, "to be included in my own life, to be spoken to, not spoken about. And you couldn't do that." Brian looked away. Rachel watched him. And this time, she didn't step in to smooth things over. "You raised us better," she said after a moment. "I tried." Then came silence, the kind that doesn't need to be filled, just noticed. Rachel stared into her mug. "Do you want us out of your life?" I let out a slow breath, watching the steam drift off my tea. "I want honesty. I want respect. But I'm not going to beg for it." There was another pause. Then Rachel looked up at me, and her eyes, they were softer than they'd been in months. "You might get it sooner than you think," she whispered. Brian stood up abruptly. "I'm done here." He tossed a few bills on the table, more than enough, and walked off. His coat flapped behind him like he wanted to leave with emphasis. Rachel didn't follow. We sat a while longer. The sky turned gray. Clouds rolled in like an old habit. I didn't ask her for anything more. We just sat there. 2 women who'd once shared lullabies and birthday candles, now separated by mistakes we couldn't quite name. When she finally got up, she didn't say goodbye, just gave me a small nod. Maybe that was all she could give, and maybe it was enough, for now. I leaned back, sipped the last of my tea, and let it all settle. No fireworks, no dramatic forgiveness, just truth, spoken out loud. And for the first time, that felt like enough. If you've ever had to stand your ground with someone you love, then you know what that moment feels like. It's heavy, isn't it? I'd love to hear your story.
if you've ever had a conversation that changed everything, or one you still wish had gone differently. If you feel like sharing, drop it in the comments. I'm here, I'm listening. And if you're wondering what I did after that cafe meeting, well, the quiet wasn't over yet. Stick with me, there's more to come. The letter came on a Thursday, not from a courthouse, not typed on letterhead, just Rachel's handwriting, slanted, a little rushed, on a pale blue card with a pressed flower on the front. I almost didn't open it. My tea had just finished steeping, rain was falling steady outside Linda's kitchen window, and I'd promised myself a quiet afternoon. But the envelope sat there on the table like a held breath. Inside was a single photo. My front porch. My porch. Still empty. Still painted that soft, fading sage green I'd always loved. The bench was still there, too. The one Paul and I picked up at a garage sale back in '93. It hadn't moved. Underneath, in Rachel's handwriting, just one line. It shouldn't have happened this way. I read it twice, then a third time, and still I didn't know how to feel. She hadn't said a word since the cafe. 2 weeks of silence. No texts, no calls, no questions. Just this quiet card. No apology, but not nothing either. There was more. A folded piece of paper, probably printed from her office. A copy of the property paperwork. My name was still on it. Primary contact, it said. Somehow, through everything, that part had slipped through. They hadn't scrubbed me out completely. Linda walked into the kitchen and raised an eyebrow. News? I handed her the note. She read it, didn't say anything, then poured herself some tea. Sounds like a start, she said finally, or an ending. Depends on the next letter. I nodded, fingers wrapped around my mug. Steam fogged up my glasses a little, and I didn't bother wiping it away. That afternoon, I sat with Rachel's words longer than I thought I would. I didn't try to dissect them, didn't try to guess her meaning, but I knew they meant something. I'd spent months reclaiming my home, my name, my rights. But forgiveness? That's a different kind of reclaiming. Slower, quieter, less about law, more about nerve. I didn't know if I was ready, or if she deserved it, or if I even believed in that word, deserve. But I believed in tea. So I wrote a card. No big speech, no lecture, just 5 words. Come for tea, if you mean it. I sealed it, wrote her name on the front, and walked it out to the mailbox myself. The door creaked like it hadn't been opened in years. Maybe it hadn't, not for something like this. When I got back inside, I set out 2 cups, just in case. I didn't check the time, I didn't pace. I let the wind roll through the porch screens and watched puddles gather along the walkway. The second cup stayed warm longer than I expected. That night, as I rinsed the mugs, I didn't feel disappointed, just expectant. Sometimes, when people come back, it's not all at once. Sometimes, it's one photo, one letter, one sentence. And sometimes, that's enough, for now. The little girl couldn't have been more than 9. She stood just inside the kitchen doorway at the community center, her backpack hanging off one shoulder, cheeks pink from the cold. "You're the lady who made the lemon pies," she said. I looked up from the mixing bowl, surprised. Flour dusted the edge of my sleeve. I'd just laid out the last of the ingredients. "My grandma talks about you all the time," she added. "She says your crusts are better than Marie Callender's." I smiled and wiped my hands on a towel. Well, I don't know about that, but I'll take the compliment. The room had that soft holiday hum. Twinkling lights overhead, volunteers folding paper recipe cards in the corner, and the smell of cinnamon and butter floating up from the oven behind me. I'd only signed up to teach 1 class, just 1. But 3 months later, I was on the schedule every Tuesday and Thursday. Linda called it purpose. I just called it something that made the days feel whole again. Today's class was lemon pie, the same kind I used to make for Brian when he was little, back before birthdays turned into text messages and holidays became tense. I hadn't heard from Rachel since the letter. Weeks had passed. I didn't count. I kept the porch light on most nights, but I didn't stare at the driveway anymore. Then this morning, while checking my phone between batches, I saw it. One voicemail. "Hi, Mom, it's me." There was a long pause. Then her voice softened. "I don't want to talk about everything right away. I'd like to visit. Just me, if that's okay." I didn't cry. I didn't even replay it. I just nodded, even though no one was there to see it. Linda stopped by around noon with more pie tins. I told her about the message, and all she said was, "We'll keep the porch light on then." Later that day, I served slices to the kids. Some wrinkled their noses at the tartness, others went back for seconds. I didn't mind either way. I wasn't trying to please anymore. I was just offering what I had. After cleanup, I packed 2 extra slices into a tin. On the drive back, I watched the trees blur past, the winter lights softening over the hills. And I thought about how strange it is, how life keeps unfolding, even after you think it's folded you up for good. Back at Linda's, I stepped out onto the porch. The wind was sharp, but I didn't go back inside right away. I set out 2 chairs, one empty, one filled. Between them, I placed a little table and a single cup of tea, still warm. I wasn't waiting, not exactly, but I wasn't closed either. Sometimes healing doesn't look like fireworks. Sometimes it's just a porch light left on, a chair pulled out, a pie cooling on the windowsill, just in case someone finds their way back. And if they don't, well, I'll still be here, making crusts from scratch, living in bold print. Because sometimes all it takes is a quiet chair and a warm cup of tea. I didn't get everything back, but I found myself again, and that was enough.
We don't always get to choose how people treat us, but we do get to choose how we respond. We can draw our lines with grace, rebuild with quiet courage, and if we're lucky, even broken bonds can find their way back if we leave room for them. If this story reminded you of your own journey, I'd be honored to hear it. Feel free to share it in the comments. Your voice matters more than you know. And if you're ready for another story about standing your ground, even when it hurts, join me next time for "My Son Planned My Exile, Then Said, We Don't Want You Here on Christmas Night. It was a winter I'll never forget, and one that changed everything."